Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you, and I thank you for taking your time out to attend this webinar on Real IT to be presented by Rob England, aka IT Skeptic. I'm Siddhan from Managed Engine Services Plus Marketing, and I'll be your host for this webinar. Today, I have with me Rob. Let me give a brief intro about Rob. Rob is an internationally recognized thought leader in ITSM. He's also an independent management consultant, author, speaker, and trainer. Rob is a published author of 7 books and many articles, best known for his controversial blog and alter ego, The IT Skeptic. He writes a large number of articles, mostly about ITSM or IT professional development, for major websites such as ITSM Watch, ITSM Review, and Datamation, and delivers webinars and interviews for organizations such as Citrix, Pink Elephant, BMC, and Managed Engine. So before much break, let's start off the webinar. Over to you, Rob.
IT as it's actually used in business and industry and in government. So you've probably heard that phrase, if you want to carve an elephant, take a piece of stone and take away everything that's not elephant. In other words, in order to understand something, a good way to start is by talking about what it's not. So let's talk about what real IT is not. I've started talking about it to a large extent to take us away from confusing real IT with the consumer experience. So that whole industry of selling direct from the manufacturer to the consumer, think Apple, is not real IT. The rules are completely different in the commercial sector. So the way that how a multi-billion-dollar competitive commodity consumer retailer builds its catalogs or genius bars or service desks has no relevance to how real IT operates. The next person who tells me how to model my real IT on Apple or Amazon or Zappos or Netflix is going to get slapped. In a normal commercial or government enterprise, their business models are not our business models, and their modes of delivering service are not our modes of delivering service. And I think this problem arises from a confusion of our personal digital experience with business, that people see how the world operates in the palm of their hand in their smartphone and start trying to apply those paradigms to real IT. But it's not real IT. It's a completely different world. Another thing that real IT is not is all about speed. So our industry is being whipped into a bit of a hysterical frenzy these days through the cult of the entrepreneur and all the startup culture that is rising up out of California. And its language is showing up everywhere in IT about how we have to pivot on this and how we have to venture that and how we have to create exit strategies. So that whole startup culture is really driving a really, as I say, a hysterical need for speed in IT, which I think is getting excessive. The technology vendors feed it too. They keep urging us on to new versions and urging us on to new technologies. The analysts work with them to create this sense of urgency because they want to. They want to beat up a market. They want to drive a demand. They want to sell product. The US has this stock market driven culture still. Doesn't seem to have died off any, where it's all about this quarter and quarterly earnings, and that whole hyper commercial approach drives this frenzy again. And it's just a cultural thing. It doesn't have to be that way. If you talk to European manufacturers or Japanese government or and I'm sure it's the same in India. There are whole sectors that operate at a much slower pace, that aren't hyped up in this way. And I think we need to resist that drive to hype us all in that way, and to understand what the real cadence of our particular industry and sector is. Another thing that real IT is not all about is competition. This competition card is played all the time in arguments and discussions. Oh, we have to do it. We have to do it because we have to remain competitive. You know, we have to be first to market. If we don't do it today, our competitors will eat our lunch. I'm all for innovation and competitiveness, and some of you will be in organisations where that really is a total obsession and a driving force for your particular organisation. But the majority of you are not. The majority of you are not in fiercely competitive retail sectors. So it's that retail confusion again, and you know, many industries are happy to take a follower strategy. Many industries don't live or die on how many weeks it takes to get to market with a particular new innovation. So once again, competition is a variant of that drive for speed. Another really big driver in our industry that is a distraction from real IT is this obsession with novelty and shiny new technologies and ideas. And you know, I described on the blog that the IT industry are like a bunch of ill-disciplined children who rush out into the street anytime something noisy and shiny drives past. You know, and ITIL went through this cycle of being massively overhyped and so on. We're seeing it with social media, we're seeing it with cloud. You know, these things come along and the whole industry just gets into an excited tizzy over it. So part of pushing this concept of real IT is to push the idea of calming down and getting back to our core business and our business priorities and our business modes of operating. So what real IT is about, I really like the slogan that some of the US police forces use, which is to protect and serve. And I think that's a great slogan for IT. I think it really encapsulates what we do. Because real IT as it is practiced within organizations to deliver the capability of those organizations, real IT is about balancing the conflicting duties of protect and serve. We in IT are the custodians of a massive asset within most organizations. Unless you're a really new startup greenfield organization, that organization has already sunk millions or billions into the information of the organization as an asset. And so we are there to protect that informational asset and the technology around it. And that's one of our primary functions in IT, to protect what's already there. At the same time, there's this tension between our other primary duty, which is to serve the needs of the business, and those needs are mostly needs for the new. So we're constantly in this balancing act between these two drivers, which are often in conflict with each other. We're always trying to find the balance between protecting the old, which is deriving the return on investment, the full return on investment in that asset, squeezing the asset, looking after the confidentiality, integrity and availability of the information, the CIA, and managing risk around what's already there in the asset, while at the same time balancing that against drivers for deriving new value from that asset, chasing competition, as I talked about, and growth of the organization and serving those needs of the new. So IT's role is balancing extracting maximum value from the existing investments against facilitating the generation of value from new investments. And it's not easy. It is a tension, a dilemma between the two. I like the word custodian that I used just before. We are not the owners of information technology, it's the organisation's asset. We are the custodians of information technology. So we're the custodians of the information itself. That's an asset, a huge asset of value to the organisation. We're custodians of the systems that we've built up around that information to be able to use, for the organisation to be able to use it in the delivery of the organisation's actual purpose. So that's all the people, processes, hardware, software, connectivity, suppliers, the whole mass when we talk about a system. And we are the custodians of the capability that we've created to deploy new or change systems. So IT architecture, enterprise architecture, analysis, design, development, release and deployment, all those capabilities for introducing the new. We're the custodians of those assets in the organisation. So real IT is the capability in-house in an organisation to manage and oversee the usage of information technology. The information technology sector is layering into interacting industries, right? When I talk about bringing this focus back and trying to get away from all the new shiny and different stuff that's been called IT, another way of looking at that is to think of it as a stratification of the IT industry into these various layers. So at the highest layer, we've got our users who are our colleagues who consume services in the same organisation as where the real IT is functioning. Our customers, so the customer of our organisation that we're projecting IT capabilities to through public websites and excuse me, services exposed to customers and so on. And also to a lesser extent consumers. I mean, we might be in a retail sector, we might be involved in the provision of services to general retail consumers. The next layer down under those users is real IT. So real IT is using the technology to steward and use the information, right, to deliver to those people. Real IT is delivering out to our colleagues and customers. And real IT operates as a sourcer or integrator of IT services, and a lot of the time these days, traditionally, it operates as the manufacturer and supplier of that IT. So IT goes all the way down, which is what this is showing, that in a lot of organisations, real IT still does everything right down to the bare metal of providing IT to those external entities. Now we know that that's changing. We know that the world is moving to a place where real IT's role within all the information technology is shrinking, that we're giving up the manufacturing and aggregation and supply of information technology to external providers more and more. The trend is that there's another layer below real IT within the organisation, which is the aggregators and suppliers of IT that we go externally to get some of the stuff from. And below them, the manufacturers of, in the broader sense, manufacturers of information technology services and software and products who deliver this stuff up to us. Okay, so that brown box, well, what used to be real IT, the real IT function within the organisation that's doing some business is getting smaller and smaller, and some of that stuff, more and more of that stuff, is coming through external suppliers who provide that to us. Some of those manufacturers supply to us directly, but more and more we're getting them through aggregators, through intermediaries who are service aggregators who put it together and on-sell it to us. Some of those manufacturers are retailers too, of course, who sell phones to the public, or who sell software to the public, or even who sell services to the public, like Office 365 or something. As I said earlier, that pure retail sector is really not real IT. It's a totally different world that operates on a massive scale of billions of customers, billions of dollars, billions of transactions, millions of transactions. It's a totally different world that I really am trying to differentiate real IT from. And then some of those aggregators and suppliers can be delivering IT services direct to our external customers. That's fine. You know, we can't do anything about that. We're trying to be a value-add intermediary, but if they want to consume direct, they can. Then there's also that notorious space, which is where our colleagues within our organisation consume direct from those external aggregators and suppliers of IT services. What's that called? That's called shadow IT. And shadow IT, as I'm going to talk about right now in the next couple of slides, I think is an astonishing failure of corporate governance to allow, and this is using shadow IT in its purest sense, right? Shadow IT is broadly used sometimes to talk about IT anywhere out there outside the IT team, but I'm using shadow IT in its more narrow specific sense to mean when the business goes and does IT without the involvement or assent or approval of the IT department. So in that pure sense of shadow IT, it just shouldn't happen. You imagine instead of saying shadow IT, substitute some other terms like shadow HR or shadow marketing. Hey, I know our business unit will go out and create a new brand for the organisation without the central marketing entity of the organisation having any say in what that branding is. That wouldn't be allowed. Or the best example is money, finance. So imagine if the finance, if business units decided that they weren't going to go through the CFO and the central finance unit of the organisation to get some money. If marketing goes to the CFO and says, we want to build a new website and we need $1 million for it, and the CFO looks in the books and goes, well, we don't have $1 million. And of course, these decisions go to executive management. Executive management look at all the proposals, look at how much money there is, take advice from the CFO about what the organisation can afford, and say, no, you can't have the money. If marketing then went, oh, well, then we'll go down to the bank and we'll borrow $1 million direct in the name of the company and we'll build the website, that would be a career-terminating move. But if they go to the CIO and the CIO says, look, there are all these really good reasons why you can't do that, and it gets escalated to management. The marketing department says to management, we'll just go and get someone to build the website for us. Management goes, sure, go ahead. I find that extraordinary. I find that just the weirdest thing that an organisation could do, and it's clearly because the executive management and the board of directors don't understand their accountability and their responsibility for the management of IT. So it's very clear to me, and I want to be crystal clear about this, that shadow IT is dereliction of duty by the governors of the organisation. COBIT 5 makes this clear, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act makes this clear, ISO 38500, which is the ISO standard for corporate governance for IT, they all make it really clear that shadow IT in that narrow sense just shouldn't be happening. It's bad organisational behaviour. So, lecture over, but that's a really important point around real IT, is that in order to do real IT, we need to have proper governance and management support to be able to be that intermediary in this diagram, to be that layer between our colleagues and customers and the supply chain that's delivering IT. There's two layers, there's two chunks to this diagram that we're looking at. The upper, there's the execution, the doing of all the IT, all the way up through the value chain, and there's the management of that, the disciplines that sit off to the side that are doing service level management to make sure that we are delivering to the service levels agreed with the colleagues and customers. There's availability management to project forward and decide what we need in terms of availability and capacity to keep delivering to those over time. There's compliance and security and audit and so on. So even though that box is getting nibbled away by us outsourcing stuff to various aggregators and suppliers and manufacturers, there's a whole piece of IT that in a properly governed organisation is just never going to go away. And that piece, this layer here that's never going to go away, is the management functions of IT, the ownership and accountability of IT that goes on within the organisation. So regardless of who does the execution, regardless of how much of your value chain you get from outside, from aggregators and suppliers and manufacturers of IT products and services, the management of policy, strategy, IT risk, security compliance, data integrity, network integrity, enterprise architecture, and so on and so on and so on. There's a reason why we have a central function looking after those things as custodians of the asset on behalf of the organisation, in exactly the same way as we have a central finance entity with a CFO keeping track of the budgets and the finance and the disbursements across the organisation. And that need for that capability will always remain. And that's what I'm really getting at when I talk about real IT. Real IT can extend down into the whole supply chain to be doing development and building apps and to be doing operations and running data centers and all of those things. But even if you give it all away, even if you have somebody run your data center for you, and even if you go to external suppliers to give you software as a service and just disband all your development teams, it doesn't mean that IT is going away. In all real organizations that are doing real IT, where IT is delivering the capability of that business, where you're not in the business of being a data center service provider, where you're actually in a real business, like a government department, a manufacturer, a large corporation. Real IT is always going to be there forever. It is never ever going away. Even if the number of people shrink, even if you take everything from outside, this is the thing we need to focus on. And this is the piece that we need to not allow ourselves to be distracted by software as a service, by the cloud, by social media and mobility and all the shiny new fads that come along. The nitty-gritty of having to protect and to serve is going to be there forever, and that's the thing that I'm calling real IT.
So thanks, Rob, for giving a sense of what real IT is and what the meaning Let's move on to questions which you have actually received. This one question which says that, how does this idea of real IT change how I do my day job? What does it mean to me?
That's a good question. I think the key, the reason that I'm so evangelical about this principle is because we allow ourselves to be distracted. The organization gets distracted. The organization lose sight of that balance between to protect and serve, and think that IT is there purely to serve. And it's all about delivering them the new. And we need BYOD, and we need it this year. And getting back to real IT is getting back to having a proper conversation with executive management, with the decision makers, to say, if we do this new stuff, if we serve over here, if we give you the new website or the BYOD or whatever, that comes at a cost. The impact on the BAU, the business as usual, the impact on the stuff that we're tasked with on your behalf with protecting, is that we're going to pull resources out of here to do that new stuff, and you've told us to cut 5% across the board. So where's the money going to come from for this new, and what would you like us to do less of over on the protect side of the balance? And it's bringing that principle back front of mind to the organization to say, hang on a minute, we're managing across a whole portfolio here of both what we've already got and all these new things you want. And sometimes the answer is just no. Sometimes the answer is just, we can't do that new stuff because it'll have too much impact. Just like the CFO can and is allowed to say, no, we don't have the money to do that. It will endanger the organization if we spend that much money. And the CFO can be overruled by the executive management, but on the rare occasions that happens, it's done as a considered opinion where they've heard the CFO explain the risks, they've heard the CFO taking their protect position, and the organisation still decides they want to take the risk. That's not what's happening so often in organisations these days. It's just, oh, you IT people, you're getting in the way, you always say no, you're just a drag, you're obstructing, and that whole protect side of the argument just isn't heard. It's trying to get that message across that we exist for two reasons, and it's our job to balance that, and we need to be heard when we have concerns.
Okay, here's one more question which you have received. If shadow IT is a failure of governance, why is it allowed to happen?
Why is it what, sorry? Or why does it happen?
Shadow IT, yeah, why is it allowed to happen?
That's the hardest thing of all, is that there's still there's much more understanding amongst boards of directors and executive management about what their responsibilities are around money. And they know that if the company loses a huge amount of money, or if it goes bankrupt, that they're next on the line, that they will be accountable. But there's not such a good understanding of the responsibilities around IT. It's changing. We're seeing boards and management through things like Sarbanes-Oxley Act in the US and the ISO 38500 standard. We're seeing that message slowly get across to them, that they're just as accountable for the proper operation and protection of those information technology assets. So this stuff is happening, but I'm optimistic it's going to happen less and less as they manage IT better, as they're as responsible about IT as they are about money.
So that's probably we can answer some of the questions later via email. So I thank again all for attending this webinar. Thanks, Rob, for this wonderful session on real IT. Thanks and have a great day. Siddhant signing off from Services Plus Market India. Thanks, Rob.
Thank you. See you, everybody. Bye, Siddhant.
Yeah, bye-bye.